I never thought my engagement party would turn into a public nightmare. My name is Harper Lane, 31, from Seattle. I once believed I had everything: a stable job, a man who loved me, and a cozy little house we proudly called our first home. But within just a few short minutes, everything I trusted shattered right in front of me. Amid the music, the champagne, and the cheers, my sister Vanessa stood up, grabbed the microphone, and said something that froze everyone in the room. "This house actually belongs to me. Harper has no right to be here anymore." And the worst part? My fiancé Ethan just stood there, silent. If you think you've experienced betrayal, stay until the end, because my story will make you rethink everything you believe about family and trust. Looking back now, I realize the signs were everywhere. They weren't loud or obvious. They were quiet, subtle, and easy to dismiss. That's how betrayal always starts. Not with a storm, but with whispers that you choose to ignore because you don't want to believe what they might mean. It began about 3 months before the engagement party. Ethan started staying late at work. He said his company had taken on a new project and that he needed to prove himself before the promotion came through. I believed him, or maybe I just wanted to. Every night I'd text him, "Drive safe, can't wait to see you." And most times, his replies came hours later. Sometimes he wouldn't answer at all, and when I asked the next day, he'd smile that tired smile and say, "You know how it gets during deadline week." Then there was Vanessa. My sister and I had always had a complicated relationship, a mix of love, rivalry, and unspoken resentment. Growing up, she was the golden child, confident, charming, the one who always knew what to say. I was quieter, the planner, the one who worked behind the scenes. When I bought my house, I thought it was finally my moment, proof that I could build something on my own. But Vanessa started showing up almost every other day. At first, it seemed harmless. She'd stop by just to help decorate or bring over a few design ideas. Ethan seemed perfectly fine with it, too fine, in hindsight. I remember one afternoon when I came home early from work and found her in the kitchen, barefoot, drinking coffee from my mug. Ethan was upstairs fixing a leaky faucet, or at least that's what he said. I laughed it off at the time. "Wow, you two are becoming best friends," I joked. Vanessa smiled, that same sly curve of her lips she'd always had when she was keeping something from me. "Just trying to make sure my baby sister's house looks perfect," she said. I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? She was family, but the little things started to add up. Vanessa had a key to my house. Ethan gave it to her, in case of emergencies. I remember the pit in my stomach when he told me, but I didn't argue. It sounded paranoid to object. Then, one evening, I came home to find Vanessa rearranging my living room furniture. My photos with Ethan, the ones from our first vacation together, were sitting on the floor. In their place, she'd hung a large framed picture of the three of us. Her in the middle, arms around both of us. "It just looks more balanced this way," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan laughed. I forced a smile, but something inside me twisted uncomfortably. A few weeks later, the financial conversation started. Ethan asked if I'd be willing to combine our finances for the wedding. I told him I wanted to wait until after the marriage to make things official. He didn't push it, but I noticed a flicker of disappointment, or was it irritation? Then Vanessa brought up the house during dinner one night. "You know, Harp," she said, twirling her wine glass, "if something ever happens to you, I hope you've got your name on that property locked down. You never know who might swoop in." Ethan coughed and looked away. I laughed nervously and changed the subject. But that night I couldn't sleep. I remember staring at the ceiling, wondering why she said it. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, like she already knew something I didn't. The next morning, Ethan left for work early. His laptop was still open on the kitchen counter. I don't know what made me look, maybe intuition, maybe desperation, but when I moved the mouse, I saw an email draft addressed to Vanessa. The subject line was blank. The body said only, "We'll talk after she signs." My stomach dropped. I didn't know what "she" or "signs" meant, but I knew it wasn't good. Before I could read more, the garage door opened. Ethan was back. I closed the laptop and pretended to be making coffee. My hands were shaking. He kissed my forehead and said, "Forgot my briefcase." That day, I told myself it was nothing. I convinced myself I was being paranoid that stress was making me imagine things. Because when you love someone, your mind becomes a defense lawyer for their worst behavior. Still, from that point on, the air in our house changed. It felt heavier, quieter. Ethan stopped meeting my eyes when we talked. Vanessa's visits became more frequent, and she started calling Ethan directly to coordinate plans, she said. One night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I heard them laughing in the living room. It was the kind of laugh that felt too familiar, too easy. When I stepped in, they both went silent. Vanessa picked up her purse and said she had to go. Ethan pretended not to notice my expression. When the door closed, I asked him, "Is there something going on I should know about?" He looked up from his phone, smiled faintly, and said, "You're overthinking again, Harper." And like a fool, I believed him. If I had trusted my gut then, maybe the engagement party wouldn't have turned into a scene from a nightmare. Maybe I would have stopped them before everything fell apart. But denial is a powerful drug, and I was completely addicted. The truth didn't come crashing down all at once. It came in fragments, a message here, a strange glance there, until eventually, all the pieces snapped together into something so cruelly clear that it took my breath away. It happened 2 weeks after the engagement party invitations were sent out. I was at work, half distracted, trying to answer emails while fighting that uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at me for days. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Lydia, a colleague who had become a close friend over the years. "Harper, I wasn't sure if I should show you this, but you deserve to know." Attached was a photo. At first, my brain refused to process it, but there it was, Ethan and Vanessa, sitting at a small cafe downtown, their hands brushing across the table, faces close enough that their foreheads almost touched. It wasn't the kind of closeness shared between a future brother and sister-in-law. It was intimate. My chest tightened so fast I could barely breathe. I stared at the photo until my screen dimmed, as if maybe it would disappear if I just blinked hard enough. I wanted to call Ethan. I wanted to scream, but some instinct, maybe self-preservation, told me to stay quiet, to wait. A few minutes later, Lydia sent another message. "There's more. I overheard them at the cafe last week. Ethan said something about getting the paperwork ready before Harper signs." I didn't understand what it meant, but it sounded serious. Paperwork. The same word I'd seen in that unfinished email on Ethan's laptop. The ground beneath me shifted. I grabbed my bag, mumbled something to my boss about not feeling well, and drove straight home. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. Every possible scenario flashed through my mind, none of them good. When I pulled into the driveway, Vanessa's car was parked outside. My pulse quickened. I quietly opened the door. Voices drifted from the kitchen, hers and Ethan's. "She still doesn't know," Vanessa was saying, her tone almost amused. "Just keep it that way until the papers are filed," Ethan replied. "Once it's done, she can't take it back." My knees nearly buckled. I pressed my hand to my mouth, forcing myself not to make a sound. Vanessa laughed softly. "You really think she'll just hand it over? She's not as naive as you think." "She will," Ethan said flatly. "She trusts me. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her." I didn't hear the rest. I slipped out the door and sat in my car for nearly an hour, numb, replaying every conversation, every late night, every time I defended them both. They weren't just betraying me emotionally. They were planning to take everything I owned. The house was in my name, but Ethan had convinced me to let him help manage some of the paperwork for refinancing before the wedding. He must have shared those documents with Vanessa, giving her access to my personal and financial information. By the time I got out of the car, my sadness had turned to fury. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding, with a mix of pain and clarity. The pieces clicked together. The late nights, the shared laughter, the secret key, the help with the house. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. The next day, I decided to find proof. When Ethan left for work, I searched through the home office. My hands shook as I opened the drawers, flipping through folders until I found a thin envelope marked with a sticky note. Draft. Property transfer. Inside was a form transferring the house title from my name to Vanessa's. My name was printed neatly at the bottom with a forged signature. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was like looking at my own death certificate. Every line on that paper was a betrayal written in ink. I took photos of everything. Then I opened Ethan's laptop again, this time with purpose. In his email drafts, I found several unsent messages between him and Vanessa. Once she signs, we can finalize everything. Don't worry, she won't suspect a thing. Make sure to play nice until the party. The party. They planned to make their move on the night of my engagement in front of everyone, when I'd be too shocked to fight back. By the time Ethan got home that evening, I was sitting at the dining table, the papers laid out in front of me. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice tight. "Funny," I said, my voice trembling. "I was going to ask you the same thing." He tried to speak, but I cut him off. "How long, Ethan? How long have you and my sister been doing this behind my back?" His face went pale. He didn't deny it. He just looked down, jaw clenched. That silence, heavier than any confession, told me everything I needed to know. When he finally looked up, he said quietly, "You don't understand, Harper. Vanessa and I laughed, a broken, hollow sound. "No, Ethan, you're right. I don't understand how two people I loved could do this to me." I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out before he could say another word. I didn't know what my next move would be, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them win. They thought they were clever, that I'd crumble quietly. They had no idea who I was when I stopped trusting. The morning after I walked out on Ethan, I sat in my car for hours, parked outside a quiet coffee shop near the harbor. The city of Seattle moved around me, ferries cutting through the mist, people rushing to work, horns echoing through the drizzle, but I felt frozen in place. My entire world had been reduced to a single question, looping in my head. How could they? When the anger settled into something sharper focus, I realized feeling betrayed wouldn't save me. Proof would. If Ethan and Vanessa were planning to steal my house, I needed evidence that no one could twist or deny. The first person I called was Zoe Miller, my best friend since college, blunt, loyal, and the only person I trusted enough to tell everything to. She answered on the first ring. "Harper? You sound like hell. What happened?" I told her everything, the photo, the overheard conversation, the forged signature. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence before she said, "Okay, we're not going to let them destroy you, but you need to play this smart." That was Zoe's strength. She didn't panic. She strategized. She showed up an hour later with her laptop, a thermos of coffee, and that determined look I'd seen only once before back in college when she exposed a professor for plagiarism. "Rule number 1, she said, setting her coffee down. "No confrontation unless you're recording. And from now on, back up everything. Screenshots, photos, voice memos, everything." We started by creating a private folder on my cloud drive labeled House Fraud. It felt surreal, like preparing for war against my own family. But as I uploaded the photos of the fake transfer form and Ethan's draft emails, a strange sense of control began to return. Then Zoe had an idea. "Harper, didn't you say your neighbor, Mrs. Fletcher, has security cameras facing your driveway?" My eyes widened. "Yes, she keeps them running 24/7 because of package thefts." "Perfect," Zoe said, typing rapidly. "If Vanessa's been coming over when you weren't home, there'll be a record." That afternoon, I visited Mrs. Fletcher, a kind but nosy widow who adored gossip almost as much as her cats. The moment I mentioned Vanessa, she sighed dramatically. "Oh, honey, that woman's been at your place more than you have. Sometimes she shows up at night with that tall man, your fiancé, right? I thought it was odd." She led me inside, and together we scrolled through footage. My stomach turned as I watched clip after clip of Vanessa's car pulling into my driveway when I was at work. In one video, Ethan arrived shortly after, carrying what looked like a stack of documents. They stayed for nearly 2 hours before leaving together. Mrs. Fletcher burned the files to a USB and handed it to me. "Men like that think we don't notice things," she said with a wink. Back home, Zoe and I watched the clips again in silence. Each timestamp lined up perfectly with Ethan's supposed late nights at the office. That was strike 1. Strike 2 came from Lydia, my coworker. When I called to thank her for the photo she'd sent, she told me something that made my blood run cold. "Harper, I think Vanessa's been using your name for more than just that house paperwork," she said. "Our company's accountant mentioned your name popped up in an inquiry about property ownership verification, but it wasn't from you." Quote. Apparently, someone pretending to be me had contacted the bank to confirm details of a pending property transfer. The call had come from Vanessa's office number. That was strike two. By now, Zoe was fully in investigator mode. She helped me install a small voice recorder behind the living room bookshelf just in case Ethan or Vanessa came back while I wasn't home. She also set up a digital camera facing my front porch. 2 days later, it paid off. Vanessa came by while I was at work. I'd taken the day off and parked a block away. She used her spare key to enter. I watched through the camera feed as she rummaged through my mail and opened a folder from my desk. Then she pulled out her phone and snapped photos of several documents before leaving. We had her: trespassing, theft, intent to defraud. Zoe grinned. That's more than enough to take to a lawyer. But I wasn't done. I wanted the final nail in their coffin, something undeniable. Something that would make the truth impossible to bury. That night I called Ethan. My hands trembled as I hit record on my phone. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk about the house paperwork. I've been thinking, maybe I should sign whatever you wanted me to." He hesitated. "Really? I thought you were still upset." "I just want peace, Ethan. Bring the documents tomorrow. Let's finish this." He bought it. The next evening, he arrived with a folder, the same fraudulent transfer papers I'd already photographed. I invited him in, pretending to be calm, while the recorder in my pocket captured every word. "So," I said casually, "this will put the house in both our names, right?" He smiled that familiar, deceitful smile. "Technically, yes, but Vanessa's name has to appear first for the refinance to go through. It's just a formality." "Vanessa's name?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "Why hers?" "It's just easier that way," he said quickly. "Trust me, Harper." Those 2 words, "trust me," were all I needed. He left minutes later, thinking I'd fallen for it again. I sat at my dining table, tears rolling down my cheeks. Not from heartbreak this time, but from relief. I had every word recorded, every lie documented. When Zoe listened to it, she squeezed my hand. "You've got them," she said softly. "Now we take this to a lawyer." I looked down at the growing folder of evidence emails, footage, recordings, witness statements, and realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just the woman they betrayed anymore. I was the woman who was going to end them. If I'd learned anything in the past few weeks, it was that people like Vanessa never go down quietly. When cornered, they lash out not with honesty, but with spectacle. And she didn't disappoint. It started on a quiet Sunday morning. I was making coffee when my phone began vibrating nonstop messages, notifications, missed calls. My stomach twisted before I even looked. The first message was from Zoe. "Harper, don't freak out. Just don't respond yet." She posted a video. A video? My hands shook as I opened my social media feed. There it was, a post from Vanessa, already shared hundreds of times. In it, she sat in her perfectly lit living room, eyes red as if she'd been crying. Her voice trembled just enough to sound believable. "I never wanted to make this public," she began. "But my sister has left me no choice. Harper Lane has been manipulating everyone, including her fiancé, for years. She tricked Ethan into investing in her house, then tried to push me out of the deal. I'm heartbroken, but the truth needs to come out." She paused, wiping fake tears. "She's not the victim she pretends to be. She's been stealing from family, lying to friends, and now she's threatening to ruin my life." The video cut off dramatically. Thousands of comments flooded in within minutes. People I didn't even know were calling me a greedy snake, a backstabber, a spoiled sister. I just stood there, phone in hand, watching my name unravel online. Zoe called immediately. "We knew she'd pull something like this," she said, her voice tight with anger. "But this might actually work in our favor." "How?" I asked, barely holding back tears. "Because she's overplayed her hand. Lies that big always crack under evidence, and we've got plenty of that." Still, it hurt. Seeing the comments, the betrayal made public, it felt like drowning in humiliation. My coworkers texted me awkward questions. My aunt left me a voicemail asking what really happened. Even my boss pulled me aside to ask if I needed time off to deal with the family scandal. Vanessa had destroyed my reputation in less than 24 hours. But Zoe was right, lies crumble under truth. We spent the next 2 days compiling every shred of evidence into a clean, chronological folder. The forged property transfer document with my fake signature. Emails and text screenshots between Ethan and Vanessa. Security camera footage of them entering my home while I was gone. Audio recordings of Ethan admitting he wanted me to sign papers putting the house under Vanessa's name. Testimonies from Lydia and Mrs. Fletcher, verifying Vanessa's actions. Once it was all organized, Zoe looked at me and said, "You could post this online right now and destroy her. But I think there's a better way. A lawsuit," I said quietly. Exactly. That night, I met with Marissa Nguyen, a real estate and fraud attorney Zoe had found. Marissa was calm, sharp, and terrifyingly efficient, the kind of woman who didn't waste time on sympathy when justice was on the table. After I explained everything and showed her the evidence, she leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Your sister and ex-fiancé committed fraud and defamation," she said. "If we move quickly, we can freeze any property transfer attempts and file for damages. And once this hits court, that little social media stunt of hers will backfire spectacularly." She smiled slightly. "Do you want to go public before or after we file?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "After. I want the truth to hit when they least expect it." Over the next week, Marissa filed the necessary paperwork. Meanwhile, Vanessa doubled down online, posting more stories claiming I'd hacked her email, that I was mentally unstable, even that Ethan had left me because I'd threatened him. Every lie burned, but I kept silent. Silence, I realized, is the loudest sound when you're planning revenge. Then came the breaking point. Vanessa appeared on a local gossip podcast, crying again, repeating her story to a wider audience. The host leaned in dramatically and said, "So your sister forged your name on documents?" Vanessa nodded. "Yes. She tried to steal my house." That was the clip that pushed me to act. Marissa and Zoe helped me prepare my counterattack, not with rage, but precision. We drafted a single post. One calm, factual statement accompanied by screenshots, documents, and video evidence, everything time-stamped, everything irrefutable. The caption was simple: "The truth doesn't need tears, just proof." We posted it on every platform. Within hours, the tide turned. Comments flipped from hate to shock. People compared the handwriting on the forged signature, the email timestamps, the security footage of Vanessa breaking into my home. Even local news picked it up. Seattle woman falsely accused by sister exposes fraud scheme. By the next morning, Vanessa had deleted her videos. Her accounts went private. Ethan, on the other hand, tried to message me. "Harper, please, you didn't have to do this. Let's talk." He didn't reply. The world now knew the truth, and the court would, too. That evening, as I sat by the window watching the rain, Zoe raised her glass of wine. "To poetic justice," she said. I smiled. For the first time in weeks. "Tokarma ireplet." But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Public opinion had shifted, but the real reckoning, the legal one, was still ahead. And this time, I was ready. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and cold, the kind of Seattle morning where fog clings to the windows like ghosts refusing to leave. I woke before my alarm, dressed in a navy suit Zoe helped me pick out, and stared at myself in the mirror. For months, I had dreamed of this moment not out of vengeance, but out of exhaustion. I was tired of being silent, tired of being doubted, tired of letting Vanessa rewrite my story. Today, that ended. When I arrived at the courthouse, Zoe was waiting outside, coffee in hand, eyes gleaming with the kind of fierce loyalty only true friends possess. "Ready to end this?" she asked. I nodded, though my heart was hammering in my chest. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. The faint hum of whispered conversations, the creak of leather chairs, the sharp smell of polished wood. Everything felt sharper, more vivid. At the far end, Vanessa sat beside her lawyer, perfectly composed, her blonde hair styled into immaculate waves. She wore a pale gray dress, soft, innocent, calculated. Next to her was Ethan, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes avoiding mine. When he finally glanced up, there was a flicker of guilt, or maybe fear. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Our attorney, Marissa Nguyen, stood tall beside me, calm, poised, the quiet storm I needed on my side. The judge, a stern woman with silver-rimmed glasses, began the session promptly at 9 a.m. Case 1175. Harper Lane versus Vanessa Lane and Ethan Walsh, on charges of property fraud, forgery, and defamation. Hearing it spoken aloud felt surreal, like watching the nightmare of the past year condensed into a single sentence. Vanessa's attorney opened with a predictable argument. My client was simply trying to protect her property and reputation. She believed in good faith that Miss Lane was attempting to seize ownership of the home unfairly. I watched Vanessa dab at her eyes with a tissue the performance rehearsed, almost flawless. Then, it was Marissa's turn. Your Honor, she began, voice steady but sharp, this is not a case of misunderstanding. It's a case of deliberate deception. My client's sister forged her signature, attempted to transfer ownership of her home, and defamed her publicly with fabricated statements. We have concrete proof, not tears, not stories, but evidence. She began to lay it out piece by piece. First, the forged deed document enlarged on a screen, my signature beside the fake one. Even from a distance, the differences were clear. The strokes, the slant, the spacing all wrong. Then came the email exchange between Ethan and Vanessa, discussing the transfer plan. V. Once she signs the document, we can finalize the listing. Ethan, make sure she doesn't suspect anything. E. She trusts me. I'll handle it. When the emails appeared on the screen, Ethan's face drained of color. Vanessa's fingers tightened around her tissue. Next, Marissa played the security footage Vanessa and Ethan entering my house while I was away, carrying folders and whispering. The room went utterly silent except for the faint audio. Then the judge leaned forward. Miss Lane, she said, addressing Vanessa, is this you in the footage? Vanessa hesitated. That could be me. But please answer clearly, the judge interrupted. Vanessa looked trapped. Yes, she whispered. I could feel Zoe's quiet smile beside me. Then came the final blow, the audio recording. Ethan's voice, unmistakable, saying, if she just signs the paper, we'll both get what we want. She doesn't even read the fine print. It played twice. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the clerk had stopped typing. Marissa closed her binder. Your Honor, this was not an accident. It was a calculated betrayal. And when my client refused to be deceived, they defamed her publicly to destroy her credibility. That video campaign wasn't protection. It was retaliation. The judge nodded slowly, expression unreadable. Understood. Defense, do you have any further statements? Vanessa's lawyer whispered something frantically to her, but it was too late. The damage was done. After a few tense minutes of deliberation, the judge delivered her decision. The court finds sufficient evidence of attempted property fraud and defamation against Miss Harper Lane. The defendants are ordered to issue a formal retraction, pay compensatory damages, and cease all public statements regarding the plaintiff. Additionally, a restraining order will be enacted. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until Zoe squeezed my hand. Vanessa's face twisted a mix of shock and rage she couldn't hide anymore. You ruined me, she hissed under her breath as we passed. I stopped, looked her straight in the eyes, and said softly, No, Vanessa, you ruined yourself. Outside, the air felt different, sharp but clean, like the first breath after a storm. Reporters waited near the steps, cameras flashing. Someone shouted, Harper, any comment? I paused, looked directly at them, and said the only thing that mattered. Tell the truth, it's lighter to carry. Then I walked away. That evening, Zoe and I sat in her apartment, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace instead of fear. Justice feels different than I thought, I said quietly. Zoe smiled. Yeah, it's Keter, isn't it? I nodded, taking a slow sip of wine. The noise was over. The lies were over. And though part of me still ached for the sister I used to love, I knew something else now. Some people don't lose you by accident. They earn your absence. It's been 6 months since the court ruling. 6 months since I stood in that cold courtroom, my hands trembling as the judge announced the verdict. 6 months since the moment I finally took my life back. And now, as I stand on the balcony of my small apartment in Portland, watching the golden light spill across the Willamette River, it feels like I'm living someone else's story. someone braver, someone freer. The first few weeks after the trial were strange. There's no instruction manual for rebuilding a life that's been broken from the inside out. People kept telling me, you must feel relieved. But relief isn't quite the word. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even victory. It was emptiness, a deep, echoing silence after the noise had finally stopped. For years, my world had revolved around Ethan's moods and Vanessa's opinions. I had lived in a constant state of reaction, adjusting, apologizing, rationalizing. When that ended, I didn't know what to do with myself. The first thing I did was move. Selling my house was the